Hello everyone, welcome back again. Today we are reading chapter 23 of Rolling Thunder, Conversation with Mad Bear. Samu and his men left in the middle of the night to return to Los Angeles. Mad Bear stayed at the house, and in the morning he talked to me while he was getting his things together and while we were having breakfast. With Samu's band, the committee people, Richard Oakes and the others gone, it was quiet. "This is a nice place you've got here," he said. "It feels good. It's a real pretty place up here and there's a nice view all around. Yes, it's a nice place. I like it here too. I'm just staying here right now. I live and work in Topeka, Kansas." "What kind of work do you do?" "I work for the Menninger Foundation," I said. "You sure type nice. Is that your typewriter you were using?" "Yes." "This is a healthy area here. You can sit in here and look out through these windows and see that things are well. See how the trees are standing. The color and the posture of the trees and plants. These things are good signs. You can tell a lot by the growing things and the living things, like the trees and the birds. That's what Samu was telling me the other day. Things are not so good down his way. There the trees bend down in despair, seeking the mother. The polluted air and the gross vibrations are painful for trees and living things, painful for the earth. These conditions we are seeing are the problems of the earth, and Los Angeles is one of the problem centers now. All the signs there point to another earthquake, like the one that happened there not so long ago. There were signs then, too, and our people saw the signs and talked about the earthquake among themselves long before it happened. Many of them left. If it happens again soon, it will be sometime in mid-April. Maybe something can be done about it this time. There are ways to work on these things. The floods are something else. The floods will come up later, up around my country, around New York and Pennsylvania. And I doubt they will be averted. That's another problem. Our first big problem came when man began to walk around on the earth as though he owned it. Because of this, we have to question whether life can continue on this planet. Now man begins to walk around on the moon as though he owns it, and a new set of problem arises. The story of Richard Oakes' near-fatal injury and his recovery in a San Francisco hospital at the hands of two medicine men was well publicized in the Bay Area when it happened, in January of 1970. Now Mad Bear told me the whole story. He had been in Oklahoma with Peter Mitten, a venerable medicine man about whom I had heard many stories from Rolling Thunder, when Oakes was hit on the head with a cue stick in San Francisco pool hall and taken unconscious to a hospital. In the time in which I had come to know Mad Bear, I had learned that he is a highly sophisticated and articulate medicine man who has traveled widely and lived and studied with Druids, Vikings, Tibetans, Hindu yogis, and Aboriginal peoples in Asia and Africa. Yet when he spoke of Peter Mitten, I got the impression that his relationship to Mitten was as to the teacher. In Oklahoma, Peter Mitten told Mad Bear that he felt someone was calling him from way out west. Someone wanted him, but he did not think he would go. "I am not of that land," said Peter Mitten. "There are medicine men who work out there. Why should they call me?" Rolling Thunder had explained that in the old days there was a medicine man for every area, and that unless he was specifically asked or were granted permission, a medicine man did not practice in another medicine man's domain. But someone came, physically, all the way from California to Oklahoma. They had found out where Peter Mitten was and they had tried to reach him in a native way. When he didn't respond, They had sent a man all the way to Oklahoma to speak to him. The man told Peter Mitten they had been calling him for days. I know, Peter Mitten admitted. The man explained what had happened to Richard Oakes. He was nearly dead. Richard Oakes had been in a coma for days, and the doctors believed he would not live. He would have wanted a medicine man to attend to him, and that was his wife's wish now. It was the only hope. There are others there. Why should they need me? Peter Mitten was firm. The situation was not only urgent but also complicated. Richard Oakes was dying in a white man's hospital. As the way of white establishment doctors, they would neither let their patient out nor let others in to try to save him, even though they themselves had little hope. Peter Mitten went to California with Madbear. They arrived at the hospital in San Francisco, and it became Madbear's task to conduct the negotiations. There was a great deal of talk which used up precious hours. Because even though the doctors had given up all hope for Oakes, they were highly reluctant to allow two medicine men to practice in their hospital. They talked to one doctor first and finally to several doctors. Many times they waited while the doctors conferred in other rooms. It is the request of the dying man that we should see him, Madbear explained. If he were a Catholic and wanted a priest, you would allow it. But he has been unconscious all the time, and he cannot request anything, much less see anybody, was the retort. In that case, his wife's request is as good as his own, and she has spoken for him. It is not necessary that he see us for us to do what we have to do, Madbear contended. Under the circumstances, since Richard Oakes was a native, it was possible for the doctors to regard these two medicine men as religious personages rather than medical. It might have been easy for them to get some time to spend a religious moment over the bed of the dying man as the doctors watched. But what they needed was time alone and unwatched so they could perform native medicine. At first, the doctors wanted to know beforehand exactly what the medicine man planned to do so they could object to some step in the procedure if they wished. They then insisted that they at least be allowed to watch. The patient would be in an observation room, and they could watch the procedure through the window. When Madbear had made it clear that they would allow no observation, the physicians began to insist again that the procedure be discussed and approved beforehand. Each time the doctors left the room for their private conference, they came back with a new stipulation. Each time Madbear refused to meet it. He insisted that they be allowed privacy with Oakes, and the doctors continually objected. Madbear talked and talked. All the while Peter Mitten remained silent, still and stoic. The doctors at last agreed to allow Madbear and Peter Mitten to be with Richard Oakes alone and unobserved for as long as they needed, if the medicine man would sign a statement taking the responsibility for whatever happened to Richard Oakes. Madbear was angered. He felt this was unjust. While the doctors had been coming and going, Madbear had been talking to a reporter from the San Francisco Chronicle who had been following the Richard Oakes case. The reporter was waiting because he learned the doctors believed Oakes would not survive for another 12 hours. You believe Oakes will die today, whether we see him or not, Madbear protested. How can you ask us to sign such a thing? Peter Mitten spoke his first words. Be quiet and sign, he said. He is dying as you talk. Now we have our chance and you want to go on arguing? I'll sign the thing. What difference could it make? So, Peter Mitten and Mad Bear signed the paper saying they would accept full responsibility for whatever happened to Richard Oakes. Immediately, they were taken to the room where Oakes lay unconscious. A nurse waited outside the door in case they needed anything. Oakes was indeed dying. There was discoloration around the chest and barely a trace of life. The spirit was leaving the body. They would have to act fast. Peter Mitten told Mad Bear that they should have a pair of birds to fly about his head. I got a couple of birds in that room, Mad Bear told me, and while I was doing that, Peter Mitten brought back the normal color to Oakes's chest. Then he wanted some hot water that had just been boiled, so I opened the door to ask the nurse for the water. She had a real strange look on her face. I thought I heard birds in there, she said. So I just told her, yeah, I opened the window. And she said, oh. Richard Oakes regained consciousness. He recovered. He was here at our powwow and he looked fine. My speculation about that strange young native who had come late to the hearing at the courthouse had proven correct. According to Mad Bear, he was an aspiring witch doctor with whom Mad Bear had had dealings in the past when he had gone to Alcatraz to look into the death of Richard Oakes's daughter. During the native occupation of Alcatraz, Oakes's little daughter died when she fell to the ground from a high stairway. Mad Bear's visit was to reconstruct what was happening there, and the meaning behind the circumstances leading to the little girl's death. Mad Bear prepared a ceremony on the island one night, and everyone involved in the event was supposed to be at the fireside. That was part of the ceremony. The entire episode was to be reenacted that night. As the ceremony proceeded, Mad Bear began to see more of the people involved and their various purposes. Among the protesters were some who had come to Alcatraz to represent a different cause, and Oakes was their opponent. His daughter had met a tragic death that had been intended for her father. Mad Bear could see the entire episode unravel as though it were all happening again. But there was one important character missing at the fireside reenactment. Mad Bear knew he would eventually have to appear, and eventually he did. He had been in the building at the time of the ceremony, conducting his own ritual upstairs in order to avoid Mad Bear below. His ritual failed, and he was defeated. He staggered to the stairway, choking and gasping, and doubled over the railing in pain, begging to be released as he was pulled down the stairs toward the ceremonial fire. This was the same man I had seen at the hearing. Recalling how he had been drawn to Mad Bear's pointing finger, I could well imagine how he had been dragged to Mad Bear's ceremony by some force that was imperceptible to me, but certainly not to him. Now all those people are more or less finished, Mad Bear said. That young guy and that woman and all her people, they will fight among themselves and they will go their separate ways. That won't be because we did it to them. All we did was to make it so that we would not receive the results of their work. And it naturally went back to them. The principle of cause and effect is at work everywhere, and somebody has to receive the results of everybody's doings. Every sentence or thought or act has an effect on somebody. If someone has a destructive thought or wish, it has to have an effect on someone. If it doesn't work on someone else, it works back on the person who created it. Of course, in the end, everyone gets their own earnings and accounts for their own debts. But just like money, it can go around and around and involve many people, and it can get very complicated. The purpose of good medicine is to make it simple. There's no need to create any opposing destructive force. That only makes more negative energy and more results and more problems. If you have a sense of opposition, that is, if you feel contempt for others, you're in a perfect position to receive their contempt. The idea is to not be a receiver. You people have such anger and fear and contempt for your so-called criminals that your crime rate goes up and up. Your society has a high crime rate because it is in a perfect position to receive crime. You should be working with these people, not in opposition to them. The idea is to have contempt for crime, not for people. It's a mistake to think any group or person as an opponent, because when you do, that's what the group or person will become. It's more useful to think of every other person as another you, to think of every individual as a representative of the universe. Every person is plugged into the whole works. Nobody is outside it or affects it any less than anyone else. Every person is a model of life. So the true nature of a person is the nature of life. I don't care how low you fall or how high you climb economically or academically or anything else. You still represent the whole thing. Even the worst criminal in life imprisonment sitting in his cell, the center of him is the same seed, the seed of the whole creation. When Madbear had finished breakfast and packed his things, my sister and I drove him down to the Greyhound bus terminal in Oakland. Along the way, he surveyed the trees and grass and gave a running commentary about the state of San Francisco Bay Area. "You know, I was watching you when you were typing the other day," Madbear said to me. It was about the third time he had mentioned my typing. I wondered whether that was perhaps the first time he had seen an electric typewriter. "Where did you say you work?" "For the Menninger Foundation in Topeka, Kansas." "Well, you should be writing. There are things you should be writing." And that is the end of chapter 23. Thank you all very much for listening. I do encourage you all, if you are interested in learning any more about Richard Oakes, he's a very important figure during the Alcatraz movement, and the native occupation of Alcatraz is a very interesting subject that I would encourage you all to learn more about. Niawa, thank you for listening.